If you have a Bible, turn to Isaiah chapter 7. We'll be there here in just a moment. But I wanted to begin a series today called Jesus, the Cure for What Ails Us. And thinking about Jesus as the Christmas cure. And I hope, I'm not sure if I'm working today, there we go. I wanted to talk to us today about loneliness. And I saw this and it kind of made me chuckle, and I thought, well, we're going to talk about a serious subject. So this defines loneliness as that feeling you get when your phone vibrates and you think, oh, somebody wants to talk to you, and you pull your phone out only to find out it says low power. We all have these feelings of loneliness. As a matter of fact, in our country, it's often called the silent epidemic. Loneliness as it relates to us. And that's why one of the great messages of the Christmas season is that Jesus is Emmanuel, or God with us. In other words, God didn't intend for us to live lonely, because he sent Jesus into the world as the cure for this ailment that is called loneliness. God with us. And so I want to take you, and I've given you a little roadmap for our journey this morning. We're going to talk about the loneliness epidemic for just a moment. Then we're going to talk about the birthplace of loneliness. How did loneliness come upon the scene? Because God didn't create us to be lonely. And then last, we'll talk about the Christmas cure. And how is it that the coming of Jesus into the world changed things as it relates to loneliness? So let's talk about the loneliness epidemic for just a minute. I'm going to take you to some Barna material. It's called Restoring Relationships. And in it, one of the things that they talk about is that there are three big challenges that people in the United States are facing today. And it probably doesn't surprise you one iota. If I had done Family Feud with all of you today, and I'd said the top three answers are on the board, here's the question, and I asked you what are the great ailments that most Americans are carrying around, you would have said anxiety, depression, and loneliness. That these are the big three. And so we'll be talking about these over the course of the next couple of weeks and looking at how the coming of Jesus into the world was really God's way of announcing to us that anxiety and depression and loneliness have found a cure in the coming of Jesus Christ into the world. The Barna material makes sure that it's clear that it doesn't matter if you're young or old, married or not married. It doesn't matter if your gender. These three things, anxiety, depression, and loneliness, affect each one of us. And it does go on to say that there are some challenges that come with being younger over older, married over single, things like that, that you notice in this too. And it says that whether you're married or single, that being part of a church family seems to help you in all of these areas to have better outcomes, because you have a faith community that you're sharing things with. But the other thing that it says is that over half of us are carrying around one of these three big triggers: anxiety, depression, loneliness. And so it's important for us to talk about it, and then also to realize that we're not the only one that is feeling some of the challenges related to these things. I want us to realize that just about 1/3 of the adult population, starting with young adults, are feeling loneliness. And what's interesting is that a survey that asked young people, how often do you feel lonely? They didn't just say we're lonely sometimes, but it indicates a large percentage were willing to say, I often feel lonely. Now, it's fascinating. There's never been a generation more connected as it relates to technology and social media and all these things. But what we begin to realize is that these are not a substitute for the things that trigger loneliness. And so this morning, I want us to realize that every one of us feels lonely, and we turn to someone. We turn to a partner, we turn to a child, we turn to a spouse, all of us need people that we can turn to when we're feeling lonely. And it indicates that these things have become very important to us. And when we look around, we realize that a third of the people that we're living around are feeling these lonely tendencies. And the other thing is, people who don't want to be single, whether they're widowed or they've never married or they're divorced, they feel a great loneliness that they carry around as well, that needs to be acknowledged by us and understood. This material says it doesn't matter anything about you, young or old, what your gender is, where you are in your life cycle. These things can come, and that loneliness is a big, big deal. So I want you to turn to the person next to you and say, did you know 1 in 3 people that we come in contact with experience loneliness? Can you tell them that? 1 in 3. 1 in 3. I want us to be thinking about that as we think about the holiday season, that 1 in 3 of us are navigating loneliness. So where does loneliness come from? Because God didn't create us to be alone. Matter of fact, God created male and female to overcome the loneliness challenge. So if we think back to Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27, God is looking at his creation, and the first time that he talks about his creation and what he wants to do, he says, let us create mankind in our image. Male and female. He's going to create them in the image of God. They will be created. So you've already said 1 in 3 to the person next to you. Now tell the person next to you, you were created in the image of God. That's pretty significant, isn't it? Yeah. Does that make you feel better about yourself? You were created in the image of God. Male and female, in the image of God, he created them. And what we also begin to realize is that then God placed us in a beautiful garden. A beautiful garden where every relationship was perfect. Our relationship with the created matter was perfect. Our relationship with animals was perfect. Adam was the perfect husband, and Eve was the perfect wife. And they had this wonderful relationship with God where he would come around in the cool of the day and would speak with them. But what we know is that this whole thing got messed up. It didn't stay the way it was supposed to be. And do you ever want to just scratch your head and think, now wait, everything was perfect, but y'all weren't happy? What is it that you wanted that you didn't have? Or what did you think you want that you think you didn't have? What's making this take place? And what we discover is that there was this desire to be like God, knowing the things that God knew. But notice that this was a pursuing of being like God apart from God. In other words, God was coming around in the cool of the day, and they could get to know God more and more and more, and they'd become more like God on this slow process of knowing God, but they wanted to fast track that, to go around God and try to get the knowledge that God has without the relationship with God. And in so doing, messed up every relationship they had. And the first real move of loneliness has to be when Adam and Eve were banished from the garden. Can you think about what that must have felt like? To be Adam and Eve, to be clothed by God, and then God to say, I'm sorry, you can't live here anymore. The relationship between us has been changed. And you're going to have to leave the garden and go live outside of it. And things changed. And everything that was right now was wrong. And it was all messed up. And if you read the book of Genesis, you see that banished becomes kind of an active metaphor for what's taking place. Cain kills Abel, and he's banished. The Tower of Babel, the people are all about themselves and self-pride, and they're banished and scattered. We find the story of Noah as one of 8 people left on the earth. And what does Noah feel like in his old age? Have you ever thought about what it would be like to be the only person of your generation left on the earth? Well, what we discover is that Noah gets drunk and exposes himself in his tent. It's not a good story. Moses. He'll spend 40 years wandering around in the fields of Midian. And when he finds a burning bush, he says, well, I'll go back to Egypt, but only if you'll go with me. He doesn't want to be alone. Same thing happens on the top of Mount Sinai. I'll lead these people, but only if you'll go with me. I don't want to be alone. And so God did something for Moses that I think is significant for us as we're thinking about loneliness. It tells us in Exodus chapter 33 that God told Moses, okay, you got the tabernacle tent, but there's also this tent of meeting that I want you to create. And this tent of meeting was a tent that was outside the camp. And what it says is, if anybody wanted to really talk to God or ask God an important question, they could go out to the tent. But what it really says is that when Moses wanted to talk to God, he could go out to the tent. And when he went out to the tent, God would descend and join him in the tent. And here's what it says. It says, Moses would speak to God as a friend talks to a friend. The tent of meeting. So, what we discover is that loneliness may be an epidemic in our country, but the stories of loneliness have been with us for a long, long time. It's part of the human condition after the fall, that things are not the way that they're supposed to be. So, what do we do about it? What did Jesus coming into the world do for us related to this topic? If you have your Bibles, turn to the book of Isaiah. I've just gotten through teaching the story of Israel, and we've been working through the entire story all semester, and guess what happens on Tuesday? Last day of class. Jesus comes on the scene in class on Tuesday. And I'm so excited, and I think the students are too, because we've been working for 21 chapters through the story, looking forward to this moment. But when we got to Isaiah, I called Isaiah the fifth gospel because there's so much in that Isaiah's story about Jesus. And so one of the things that we notice is that Isaiah is prophesying about difficult days for Israel. Difficult days for Jerusalem, that it's not going to be easy. These are going to be some tough times. Do you feel like these are difficult days we're living in? I think you do. Probably the most difficult days I can remember. Not the most difficult days there's ever been, by any means, but difficult days. And Isaiah prophesies in the midst of these difficult days. And one of the things that he says that people should look forward to is this prophecy that says from Isaiah 7:14, all right then, the Lord himself is going to give you a sign. Look, there will be a virgin who will conceive a child. Now this is being written 700 years before Jesus. But it's saying there's going to be a day when there's going to be a virgin who's going to have a child. And she will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel. And he'll be a game changer. With him, people will say, God is now with us. Everything's changed. Emmanuel, God is with us. Isaiah was trying to say, God hasn't given up on you yet. You're not alone. The God of the Old Testament is a God who is with us and will prove it one day through the birth of this son. But even as you're reading through the book of Isaiah, you will keep seeing this idea of Emmanuel and God with us pop up. That God is present in the difficult times, that God is there in the difficult days. And so Isaiah reminds us that when you're going through difficult times, Emmanuel, God is with us. When you need a strong deliverer, Emmanuel, God is with us. When you are about to give up and to lose all hope, someone says, Emmanuel, God is with us. Now look over in Matthew chapter 1, verse 18. And you know how this works. Joseph has just received the news that he never wanted to hear, he thought. And that was his wife was his betrothed wife, his fiancée is what we would call her, was pregnant. And he was not the father. And he's trying to figure out, what do I do? And because he was a good man, he was going to put her away quietly and not expose her to any kind of public disgrace. But then Joseph fell asleep and had a dream. And in this dream, an angel appears to him and says, Joseph, son of David, don't be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are given to give him the name, first and foremost, Jesus, because he will save the people from their sins. But then, reflecting upon this, and all this took place to fulfill what the Lord had promised through the prophet Isaiah 700 years earlier. It's finally happened. The virgin has conceived and has given birth to a son. And you'll call him Emmanuel because he's different. He is God with us. God in the flesh. God taking on skin and bones. God walking in the world that we walk in. God experiencing the things that we experience. God in a family system that wasn't perfect, like we're in a family system that wasn't perfect. God dealing with relationships with people who are selfish and prideful. All of these things, God enters into our world. God with us. And the poor of the poor and the rich of the rich show up at the manger and discover that God is now with us. God has entered into our story. God has written himself in, and everything is beginning to be made right again. Here is this one who has perfect relationships with the created matter, and that's why he can do miracles. Perfect relationships with the animals. They do his bidding. Perfect relationships with other humans. And this dynamic relationship with God. And he's walking among us, and we are discovering what it's like to see God in our midst, living in our world, experiencing the things that we experience. You remember how you turned to each other and you said that you were made in the image of God? Genesis 1, 26 and 27. The mystery of Christmas and of Emmanuel and God with us is that now God says at the Christmas story, let us create God in man's image. That's what's been turned upside down. Genesis 1, we were created in the image of God. Matthew 1, God took on the image of mankind and entered into our world, condescending into this world to show us that God is with us, truly. God is with us. Remember what I told you about that tent of meeting? It was a place where Moses could go and speak to God face to face. Well, when John's writing the prologue to his gospel, he gets to verse 14, and he says, the Word became flesh and pitched his tent with us. And we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only, full of grace and truth. The tent of meeting is Jesus. He is the one that you can join, meet, enter into relationship with. and discover that God is with us. I think Adam and Eve, if they really had known what they were looking for is God with us. God with skin and bones. God entering into our story. God becoming part of our story and becoming one with us. So, we know there's a loneliness epidemic. We know it's all around us, and sometimes it's us. And we all know what's our triggers when we're feeling lonely. When we binge on Netflix. When we go to the mall and spend money we didn't have. When we overeat late at night. And we wonder what's triggering this, and what we deeply know inside is that there's sometimes this longing inside of us for something more. And that longing is for Emmanuel. That longing is for God with us. So let me remind you of a couple things as we close this morning. Jesus is the Christmas cure. He's the cure for what ails us. I want us to understand that everyone who is alone isn't necessarily lonely. Feeling lonely is a feeling, and it can happen when you're surrounded by people. I mean, you can be in Times Square in New York City and feel alone. You can have 1,000 friends on Facebook and feel alone. You can be a social media influencer and have 1 million people following you on your every tweet and feel alone. Because we have to understand that loneliness is this feeling inside that there's something missing. And we all know and we can see when people are beginning to show the signs of loneliness. They're oversharing, or they don't know how to navigate some relationships. We know what's going on, and sometimes we wonder, why are people acting the way that they are? And it's often that hurt people hurt people. So let me give you 4 thoughts or 4 gifts that I want to remind you of this Christmas season that can help you when you're lonely. You ready? I'm going to do these fast. Number 1, God's creation. God created this beautiful, wonderful, fantastic world because He loves you. And because you can feel His presence sometimes when you walk the street, when you see the Christmas lights, when you just get out and begin to realize what a beautiful world this is and that God gave it to you as a gift. So enjoy it. Go out in it and remind yourself you're not alone. God created a beautiful world for you to enjoy. The second thing is enjoy God's companions. Have you ever thought about the fact that a pet is a gift from God? And they help us with loneliness, don't they? Some of us have some great friends that are pets, and we're giggling right now because somebody has finally told us it's okay for us to admit that I consider my pet to be a friend, okay? Yeah, I don't put a stocking up for him, but I consider him a friend. Well, God created these companions, or going to the zoo, or doing the things that you can do from a window, admiring birds, listening to them sing, watching the squirrels as they do what they do. But these are all gifts from God, and they remind us of God's presence and that we are not alone. But we should enjoy people, and we should get out, and we should invite people over, and we should light candles, and we should sit around, and we should talk, and we should fellowship, and we should share. And we should laugh, and we should cry, and we should tell stories, and we should tell the stories that we told last year again this year. And we should pass on the stories to those that come after us. And we should remind each other that, oh, God gave us people, and that we need to value these relationships. And that sometimes we've isolated ourselves. We've closed ourselves off from people. We don't schedule the things that are important, and we live a private life, and then we wonder sometimes why we're lonely. God gave us people as a gift. And what I wanted you to remember is that you know people right now who are lonely, who could use a visit or a phone call or a reminder that you're there. And you know who they are today. And I don't want you to forget about them. Think about those that are part of your story that are lonely today. And then also, this Christmas season, ponder the great mystery of what it is that God loved you enough to enter into this world and to take on all the mess of this human condition so that you could realize you are never, ever alone. God is always there. And God is there ready like an attentive meeting to speak with you, to listen to you, to talk to you as a friend talks to a friend. God is with us. And because it's the Christmas season, I can also say that the God who is with us is the God who is for us. So much so that he did not spare his own son. That the one who entered into this world was also the one who died for you. And the one who died for you is also the one at your baptism who now begins to live inside of you. The God who is with us became the God who is for us, who became the God at our baptism that lives in us and dwells in us. And we can feel his presence in us, inside of our heart. 1 in 3 are lonely today, but the God who is 3 in 1 has done everything he can possibly do to remind you of his love. So let me close with these words, and the message will be yours. I am convinced that neither death nor life, angels or demons, the present, the future, or any power, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate you from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord. God is with us. And if you've never surrendered yourself to him, if you've never taken him on in baptism, if you've never felt the presence of God through his Spirit in your heart, God longs for that today. And for the rest of us, maybe you're the cure to the loneliness of somebody else that you'll come in contact with this week. So let's be the hands and feet of Jesus as well. If you're subject to the call of Christ in any way, come to the front as we stand and sing this song.
Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful day I will